I had a good experience yesterday. I spent much of the day with a fundamentalist who we were at loggerheads. I'm the tall, white, European, middle-class, intellectual Englishman of some age, 74 coming up, and he was the short, Maori, deprived background, gang-related experience. Both of us become Christian, but at loggerheads. He was bristling at what I presented, all the wrong vibes to him. And I was relating to him as if he was going to understand my language and my sincerity. And the people who really knew where they were going in the room were two ladies who decided they'd exit. One is his, in effect, spiritual partner, and the other her friend. And they went away to pray about these two, that they'd somehow stop being at loggerheads and come to a harmony. And, well, they were successful. We found a way through. And I was trying to think, well, what behaviour of mine or his actually got us through? And I can't tell what was in his mind until I made some human link across the divide. And I was trying to work out what that was. I mean, I knew I was battling to empathise with his view and show that I empathised with his view. So I was listening to him and constantly throwing back what I thought he was thinking, and he was qualifying it. And it didn't seem to be too consistent from my intellectual point of view, so it was difficult to know whether I was to take it that he was believing that, I don't know, something or the contrary view. And if I was not careful, I was going to be at pains to point out that it wasn't consistent in what he was saying, which of course does not empathise with anybody. You don't want to do that. They may not be consistent with what they're saying, but you could at least reflect back to them what they are saying, not contrast it with what they were saying 2 minutes earlier, as you might see it and hear it. But I know somewhere in that I abandoned it and thought, can he empathise with something I've experienced? And I talked about the fear I had. Somehow I neatly got onto, I give myself the credit here, not the ladies praying. It was probably the ladies praying that did it. But I got onto a topic which, how I was scared when I heard Dad come in at night. And he could relate, I could tell. He was suddenly relating to me as a person who had a background that he knew something about, what it is to be in fear of someone, and that fear linger with you even after the person's dead. You know, I could hear the same sounds, and my stomach could turn over for, I don't know, 10, 15 years after leaving home. And I added to it, I heaped it up a bit with the way I'd been rescued by a lady from being fostered from birth. Suddenly he realised, oh, I'm not dealing with this privileged, he's had it all nice. You can be giving those vibes and yet come from, well, a deprived background. He was rescued from a bad fostering situation from birth by a lady who was kind to him. And he didn't actually come to his mum until after suffering TB. From the deprivation, no doubt. And when he did, Mum and Dad were hating each other despite their absence. And suddenly He was empathizing with me, and his whole attitude to me relaxed. He could be the lovely Christian that he wanted to be now. Absolutely miraculous. And I don't know how much of that input was coming from the ladies who were praying, but I mean, how wonderful. And the rest of the day was really super with him and the ladies. Everything just transformed. What was it caused by? Was it caused by the two ladies praying? Bringing in the help of God on the issue, the overruling these two stupid men that were locked in battle. Was it my attempt to exercise the non-violent communication skills of, which I've not perfected, I might point out, but which I know about, of Marshall Rosenberg, that, you must show empathy. Well, I wasn't getting anywhere showing empathy. And I switched to, can I get him to empathize with me, even though I hadn't successfully shown to him that I'm empathizing with him. He's misunderstanding everything I say. It's not coming across as empathy, it's coming across as arrogance and dominance. I'm in a dilemma. Let's try the other step, which is after you've established the empathy, which I had not established effectively, but at least it wasn't being received. I was actually empathizing with him. I could understand, as I felt, how he was, where he was coming from, in a sense, although I haven't experienced it myself. I could empathize with the contrast that he had experienced, but I couldn't get that through to him. But anyway, but he could empathize with me when I just touched on his experience, in some sense, from what I had in my life that he could relate to. And suddenly I was a human being to him. Not only a human being in the way that he was, but one that had found the same solution, Jesus. It's expressed in a different way, but that's somehow acceptable to him now, because he understands my story. Lovely, wasn't it? Is it Mark Twain who said that? My enemy is the person whose story I have not yet heard. And he heard part of my story, I mean quite deliberately on my part. And he was transformed, and I could see the loveliness of him in the rest of the day together. He even asked me to pray for him, and he has a healing ministry. Wow. And he should ask me to pray for him. And we just left on, just in fellowship. He says, come any time. What a wonderful day, Lord. Thank you, Heavenly Father. I just felt that. I just feel that's lovely. And now do you see, I'm in joy, and I'm in joy with God and thankful to God. I've seen the goodness of God in yesterday, in what God was doing. And one gives him the glory. Glory means to give good report to God, that somehow he got you through. The more glory God gets, the more people focus on him. God's the answer. Perhaps I'd better look to God. Do you see, it's not focusing on the problem. It's focusing on God. It's focusing on goodness. It's being in the midst of battle, but visualizing victory. Imagining an alternative way of getting there. What else have I got in my armour that can be used now in this battle? Not against this man, but to bring heaven on earth, your will, God, your will, Father. I've tried empathy, it doesn't work. Okay, call out the goodness that's in him then. What does he empathize with? Oh well, he'll empathize with the deprivation that he's experienced. I wonder if he's experienced violence with his dad. I bet he has. I wonder if he can relate to husband and wife warring with each other. Probably. I wonder if he'll relate to the fact of being ill and as a kiddie and trying to struggle with a world that's hostile and difficult and not bringing in the goodies. Oh yes, he'll be able to identify with that. Give it to him then. That's what you have in your purse. Spend it. Now's the time to spend it. Tell him. Give him your testimony. Do you see? I didn't give him my testimony as to how I found the Lord, which is what, is the traditional way in the Christian evangel circles. I gave him my testimony of what my life's experience was and what I was up against and suffering. And he knew all about that. And he could see a fellow man before him. And he loved him. Marshall. He was loving Marshall. And I didn't need a breakthrough with him. I knew in my heart trying to love him, but he was hostile to me. And he said sorry in the nicest way. And I agree, I didn't say sorry. I did say, though, that I know how bad I appear. This tall, white, European, to a Maori is not a good start. And he said, in his apology, he said, I'm sorry, I went back to my old way of recoiling at your, the vibes I was giving him. And I said, yeah, I know, I give these, don't I? I look like this. Well, I actually said something else. I did mention that, but I said, I find this when I come across a man in a black suit. I associate it with the city and my dad, and I'm cautious immediately. Other people, like Americans, see the dark suit and the tie and shirt, and they respect it and they feel comfortable and shake hands. You shake hands with me in church and I think of the businessman and how ingenuine it is in the business world of London and the world my dad worked in, and who my dad was, who I was scared of. Always went to work in a dark suit and tie, black shoes, polished, and I'm repelled. And it's deep in me, even though I'm now Christian. And I was telling him that. Oh yes, that's what was repelling me. You're sitting there with a shirt. I probably had a tie on too. And a nice woolen jumper, and I looked like this awful European person that is symbolic of the oppression that his people and he in his society of poverty were struggling against and oppressed by. I'm giving all the wrong vibes and I can't help it. And I'm telling him this. And he says, now I'm empathizing, you see. He didn't say that, but I'm saying that now I was empathizing truly. And it got through. Yes, you do understand what's wrong. And he was ashamed that he was reacting to me that way because he also felt I was a human being as well and loved what he loves and was not part of this tyranny that I appeared to come from, but on the contrary have risen out of it and rejected it. That I have rejected exactly what I seem to be. And he was happy, he was at ease, and he could love me again. Wow, thank you, Heavenly Father. Thank you in particular, Father, that you've given a recording here that shows that when you focus on the good, simply a little example of the good of yesterday, that's what really lifts us spiritually. You know, I've got slight tears in my eyes with the sheer success of yesterday with this chap. Absolute blessing. And I'm lifted far more than the two recordings on Doom that I've done. Although they both, they both struggle out of the mire. They both have value in some sense. They have a great deal of insight, I can see that. But they don't have the transcendence of focusing on what is good in life and learning by it. We just feel that we're building a spiritual future that way. Whereas all the analysis in the world, when it's focused on what's wrong in the world, just seems to take us further into what's wrong. Doesn't bless. I mean, you do need to be aware of what's wrong to know what to avoid, but you must then avoid it, not spend all your time wedded to it. Do you see? So we do learn by it, and it's very difficult for someone who's constantly giving their testimony, because they're constantly going back into the harm and the difficulty of, and they have to be careful in their testimony that they don't, like I may have fallen into here in those other recordings, of dwelling on what's wrong disproportionately. We must give, 5-10% to what's wrong so that we know what to avoid, and 90-95% of our attention to what is good and right and lovely, so that we develop that. If we give more time to attending to noticing what's wrong and dealing with it and focusing on it than we do with what's right and focusing on that, then we start to go downhill at an ever-increasing rate, and you end up with overwhelming depression and suicide. The man who in his heart says there is no God, and that means no humanity, we cease to exist quite quickly. And we will wipe our humanity out on the planet if we were to do that. We won't do that, of course. We very quickly, it's a self-regulating system, as I've said. It's a system whereby if we suffer too much harm, we hate it so much that we're ejected out of it, we're repelled out of it, we're almost spewed out of it because we just start to reject it so desperately. We cry out to God. But I mean, nobody wants to come the hard way. So a little wisdom rescues us quickly. And the little wisdom is quite simply, whatsoever is good and lovely, think on these things. Perhaps not 100%, you need to recognize what's bad so that you can avoid it. But do make sure you avoid it so that 95% of your time at least is in the right direction. And you'll be super blessed. Thank you, Heavenly